To help inspire you, I would like you to travel back in time with me to the year 1502, before anyone had ever heard of an American bison over in England and the surrounding areas, the French and the Spanish. They had never heard of or seen an American bison before. The very first European to ever see an American bison was a Spanish explorer named Cortez. He came over to America, and particularly South America, where he encountered the Aztecs. And he saw the buffalo for the very first time in the menagerie of Montezuma's kingdom. Montezuma was an Aztec emperor. And he described the bison for the very first time as having the mane of a lion. Other explorers who saw the bison later described the bison as being like an ox, but it had the mane and roar of a lion, that it had the hump of a camel, and it had the tail of a scorpion. We don't know exactly where that buffalo came from, the one that was in Montezuma's menagerie. There were no other descriptions of bison being that far south. However, there were a lot of descriptions of bison being in Texas. So that was the very first time that a European man had ever seen a buffalo. Now, before we get into any more stories, the word buffalo comes from a French word. I think it's le bœuf or something like that, which comes from, again, Europe, where people are accustomed to seeing African buffalo. African buffalo are black-skinned. They don't have woolly coats. They have, I always say that they have horns that kind of looks like the girls' pigtails. You know, it comes off their heads like that. So it's a different animal entirely. But that was what they were accustomed to seeing. So people started calling them buffalo. And that name kind of stuck. It stuck with all of the cowboys and all of the Indians, you know, when the Indians, quote unquote, were learning the English words for certain things. Now, the Native American people had their own words for this animal. Their stories of its origin go back to the creation of mankind and the creation of the world. So their relationship with the bison had been incredibly deep and incredibly long before the European man ever saw the American bison. But when they were learning how to speak together, how to talk together, they learned the word buffalo. And so now everybody knows this animal by the name buffalo. And we don't have scientists, educated persons coming across the plains to see these animals until they were almost completely extinct. So, and in order to change the name, you'd have to change the opinion of so many people who had already told the stories or had been telling the stories for generations to their families about the animal. And so the name it just stuck. And we call them both. We call them bison, we call them a buffalo, because we know them as both here in America. Scientifically accurate, the name is bison. But the other story I wanted to tell you is a Lakota story, which is associated with Wind Cave. Wind Cave is now a national monument, is a park where you can go, you can learn more about this story from Lakota storytellers. I think it's best told by them anyway. But the story is in the creation of the world. Before the world was done, and it was being made ready for mankind. And so there were animals and there were plants, but man had not yet been placed on the earth. And the way that the spirit world, I guess, could be accessed was through this hole. It was a hole in solid stone that led to the Wind Cave. Which is a huge, huge network of caves. It's like, it is so deep and so expansive. We have not explored all of it yet. It is that big. But it is said in the Lakota stories that somewhere down there, they could access the spirit world. And that was how the the buffalo came to be was that the people, all the people, were still in the spirit world, and a wolf was sent down into that tunnel by a trickster, and the wolf was carrying with it all kinds of tempting things like berries and clothes and meat, things that would really appeal to people, and it brought it down to the people in order to entice them to come up above the surface before the world was ready for them. And so the people partook of it. They ate the fruit, they ate some meat, they put on the clothes, and they wanted more. They wanted to find out where all this stuff came from. And so the wolf told them, well, if you come back with me, I'll show you. I'll show you where they came from. And so you have one of the great ones of the people. He said, the Creator hasn't told us to go up yet, so we're going to stay here. I'm going to stay here. That's what he's told me to do. But you had others who partook of the food, and they said, I want to see where it goes. So they went up. They decided to go up. And when they got up, the wolf led them to the trickster who had who had supplied him with all of that food and with the clothing. And she starts telling them how to make the clothes and how to find the food. But because they had never had to forage before, they were pretty slow. They were very slow at pulling it together, and they were just kind of playing with it, as people would do before they realized that they actually have to depend and rely on it. And so the seasons pass, and before you know it, it's winter. And when it becomes winter, they don't have enough food, and they don't have enough clothing, and they're just freezing, and they're starving, and they're desperate for the comforts of home. And so they go back to Wind Cave to return to the spirit world, only they find that it's completely covered up by snow. It's too late to go back. And so they sit down and they start to cry, and the Creator hears them, and he asks them what they've done and why they had left. And because of what they did, they had to suffer the consequences of it. But the Creator was very merciful, and he changed them into buffalo. And that was how the buffalo came into being. Now, when the world was finally ready for the people, and the rest of the people came up from the cave, they found out that they saw all the beautiful things that the first people saw. They saw grass, they saw trees, and they saw the wind and the blue sky. But they also saw another thing. They saw the hoof print of the buffalo. And they were told by Creator, follow the hoof print of the buffalo, and you will be able, and it will show you how to get all the things that you need, all the food that you need, all the clothing that you need. And that is very deeply ingrained in the Lakota culture, even, forever. It has been gone back forever. That's their origin story. And their tribe, their culture was to follow the buffalo, and they were following the buffalo from season to season for food and for clothing, for housing, for economy, for tools, for trade, for all of those things. That it was a very big and important thing. And there are so many different kinds of stories in different tribes and different cultures who tell pretty much a similar story of how the bison and how mankind came to the world together in that creation, and that they've been having this relationship since then that has been miraculous and beautiful. And it's kind of funny how only in our day we don't have those same connections with the buffalo as we did, because they're not around. We don't have access to them. But I did hear another story, and I'm going to tell you real quick, about the bison. Back in indigenous culture days, bison numbered in the millions, 30 to 60 million, and a sight like that was very common. Look how thickly they huddle. As far back as the mountains you can see. They are so many. So to think that their bison would ever go extinct, it was beyond imagination. There's no possible way that that could happen. So they didn't believe prophecies that were told to them that someday the bison would go away. It would go to sleep, and the people would be left without it. But as we see through history, that did become the case when the bison began to be killed in millions by the European man, and as the government also led both indigenous people and European people to collaborate in destroying this resource for the people and this relationship the people and the bison had. But it was also told in those same stories and those prophecies that there would come a day when the bison would return and that they would be able to be with mankind again. And that hasn't happened just yet. Bison are still limited to national parks and to different ranches. But it is something I'm looking forward to, and I hope that you do too. So that's just a few stories. I hope that inspire you. And if you have any other questions, please ask me.